The Sig P365 XL is easily the most impressive new handgun I've tried in a long time. Today I want to talk about why it is rapidly becoming one of my favorite options for concealed carry. This gun falls into a whole new category of concealable semi-autos. They aren't single stack and they're not double stack either. They're kind of somewhere in between. Let's go back to the 1990s, the heyday of the double stack Wonder 9. At that time, a compact handgun was basically a full-size double stack pistol with the grip chopped down and the slide and barrel shortened a little bit. For a subcompact, they just shortened everything a little more. This practice was embodied in a couple of the most popular autos from the time, the compact Glock 19 and the subcompact Glock 26. When all the other gun companies started cranking out their own polymer pistols in the early 2000s, they followed the same basic template. Then a few years ago, the polymer single stack 9mm came along and shook things up a little bit. In 2012, the Smith & Wesson Shield was not the first in this category, but it was the gun that sort of brought the single stack 9 out of a niche status to become one of the most common types of carry guns in the country. Since then, we have seen dozens of new polymer single stack 9mm pistols come from every corner of the industry, and now we're all sick of them, especially those of us who have to evaluate and review these things for a living. In January of 2018, Sig Sauer rescued us from this endless tedium with something that was actually a little bit different, the P365. It looks like a single stack 9. It's about the same size as a single stack 9, but they somehow managed to cram 10 rounds into this little clown car of a magazine. The typical single stack 9mm mag holds 6 to 8 rounds, but this is not quite a single stack magazine. The top 3 or 4 rounds in the mag are more or less stacked right on top of each other, but then the mag tapers outward, and then the rounds are sort of staggered toward the bottom like a double stack. The gun was a big hit. It won all kinds of awards. There were some reliability issues early on, but the worst of those seemed to have been worked out after the first year or so. In May of last year, SIG released a version with a frame-mounted ambidextrous manual safety, and then last July they rolled out this version, the P365 XL. It's got the same slim profile as the original P365, but with a longer barrel and a slightly longer grip for flush-fitting 12-round magazines. SIG also makes an extended 15-round magazine. It's about 3 ounces heavier than the standard P365 at 26.3 ounces loaded. Most of that additional weight comes from the longer slide and barrel, which is 3.7 inches instead of 3.1. It is available with or without a manual safety. This one does have the safety. It has the X series straight trigger. Now that's only available as an aftermarket upgrade for the original P365, but it is standard on the XL. It also has, as standard, a set of SIG X-Ray 3 night sights and a slide that is machined to accept a red dot optic. Now, it's worth asking why I have taken an interest in this particular gun, or the P365 in general. I'm content to carry around a snub-nose revolver most of the time. A glorified single stack with a couple of extra rounds in the mag doesn't do much for me on its own. If I'm going to seriously consider a carry gun for my own personal use, it really comes down to 3 things. It has to be very easy to shoot, very easy to carry, and it has to meet my personal standards for safety. I'll get back to those first 2 in a minute. Let me get the safety thing out of the way first, or maybe risk management is a better term. If you've been watching my videos for a while, then you know that for semi-autos, I prefer hammer-fired guns, whether they are single action only or double action single action. I like to have the ability to thumb the hammer so that it is physically impossible for the gun to fire while it's being reholstered. The striker control device that's available for Glocks is the next best option. It does the same thing as a hammer when you're reholstering. A manual safety is a distant third option, but depending on how it's designed, I will consider it for a carry gun. Now, I don't think safeties are for everybody. I'm especially reluctant to recommend a manual safety for a novice shooter or for really anyone who doesn't practice fairly regularly. You want that safety operation to become second nature, and that just requires some time and repetition. But I'm going to be drawing and reholstering a carry gun thousands and thousands of times, both in dry practice and at the range. No matter how you carry the gun, every reholster has the potential to turn into a catastrophic accident. All it takes is one distraction, one momentary lapse in attention. So, in addition to following all of the best practices for safe gun handling and for safe reholstering, I like there to be at least one extra layer of mechanical safety to help mitigate that risk. I especially like it if that extra layer doesn't compromise the usability of the gun. Now, whether this manual safety does that or not is debatable. Now, I'm about to admit to an embarrassing amount of admiration for this gun and talk all about how amazing it is, but this manual safety is not good. It's also not horrible. It's not like the miserable little nub of a safety that you'll find as an option on the Smith & Wesson Shield. It's not as bad as that weird little safety on the LCP22 I talked about a couple of weeks ago. It does have a very positive click on and off, and it's ambidextrous. It could still be much better. It's not wide enough, and it needs to be positioned about 1/4 of an inch forward down the frame. Now, I don't know why gun companies keep screwing this up. I think it's further evidence that the people who are making these design decisions don't actually shoot the guns. There are plenty of examples of good manual safeties out there, so there's not really any excuse for not knowing what one should look like. I think I've mentioned the safety on the M&P 22 compact before. This is an excellent safety. It's not big at all. I don't think a good safety has to be huge, but it's wide enough that you can rest your thumb on it while you're shooting. And when you grasp the gun, the knuckle of the thumb just naturally comes down on top of the safety to disengage it. You really can't miss it. The P365 safety is just barely big enough to be usable and just small enough that I tend to miss it on my first try every once in a while. And if I rest my thumb on it, this little sharp edge at the rear of the safety rubs against my thumb when the gun is recoiling. Now, at first that was just kind of annoying, but on a long range session, it will actually cut my thumb open. Right now, I've got a nasty little blood blister here that is under the scar tissue from the first couple of times it happened. Now, honestly, I could live with that and just put a Band-Aid on my thumb if the safety was just wider and easier to disengage. So Sig, please take some of that sweet, sweet cash from charging $50 each for these magazines and give it to your R&D team so they can fix this safety. Okay, now I can talk about all the good stuff. The appeal of the P365 XL is not simply that it is small and therefore easy to carry. A lot of pistols are small. This gun is small and shootable, and it's small in a different way than other pistols. So let's look at some size comparisons so I can show you what I mean. Here on the right, we have the world's most ubiquitous compact 9mm, the Glock 19. On the left is Glock's single stack 9mm, the Glock 43. Now, it's not the smallest 9mm out there, but I think it's among the smallest 9s that are still reasonably shootable. I'm going to overlay these two and align them by the grip tang. That's the highest part of the grip where the web of your hand would go. Now, obviously, the 43 has a shorter slide and grip, and the trigger reach is also a bit shorter. If we look at them from the back, the 43 is significantly slimmer. I measured the widest part of the grip, not including the magazine well, and it's 0.81 inches for the 43 and 1.31 inches for the 19. Now let's throw the P365 XL in there. Just as you might expect, it's right in between the two, maybe a little closer to the 43 with a grip that's just 1 inch thick. But let's go back to the side view. Again, the Sig is right in the middle in terms of slide length and grip height, but check this out. Look at how much shorter the distance is between the top of the slide and the bottom of the trigger guard. And then look at how short the grip is from front to back. If we rotate the Sig a few degrees to adjust for the atypical grip angle of the Glocks, then you can see an even bigger difference. I'll do one more size comparison because I'm not trying to just pick on Glock here. This is a Walther PPS M2. It is a tragically underrated single stack 9mm pistol. I think it's easily the softest shooting of any of the polymer single stack 9s. It's also a little bigger than most of them. Here it's loaded with a 7-round magazine, and let's overlay the Sig again. They're about the same length, but the Sig is smaller in every other dimension. From the rear, we can see that the grip is also about the same width. What this means in practice is that the Sig P365 XL is a lot less bulky than you might expect. You can't tell just how concealable it is and how little room it seems to take up in your waistband just by looking at the specifications on paper. Of course, that all depends on having a good holster to go with the gun. I've been using this Filster Classic Appendix holster with a Mod 4 clip from Discreet Carry Concepts. I know that holster selection is a very individual thing. There is not a single holster out there that's going to work for everybody any more than there's a single gun that works for everybody. But I have been really happy with this setup. There is a wedge that's built into the bottom of the holster so that the grip stays tucked in against your body. And then they've got this thing here that is called the tuck strut, and that levers against your belt to keep the gun close to the body along the other axis. This has been my pandemic setup. I've been carrying this pretty much all day, every day that we've been on lockdown. Of course, that means it's great for just sitting around and watching Netflix, but I've been busy. I've also been working on a bunch of projects around the house. I cleaned out and rearranged our whole garage. I cleared a whole bunch of brush in our yard, and then I built a chicken coop. So that's been a lot of stretching and squatting and crawling, reaching, lifting, all kinds of motions while wearing the P365 XL. And I don't really feel like it's ever gotten in my way. Let's talk about shooting this thing. I've got a little over 2,000 rounds through it so far. I haven't had any malfunctions or mechanical problems of any kind. Now, in the year 2020, that is actually a fairly low bar for a modern semi-automatic pistol to pass. We kind of expect that kind of reliability out of our handguns at this point, but I wanted to mention it because there were some known issues with the early P365s. I don't have any reason to believe that this particular gun has any of those problems. It even ate through 500 rounds of some nasty water-damaged Tula steel-cased ammo. At least half the rounds in that box had visible rust on them. The Sig went through them with no issues. Now, I don't know whether that's a credit to Sig or to Tula, but either way, I think it's pretty impressive. Now, I've said this gun is shootable, and that's always a difficult thing to quantify. Obviously, not everyone is going to find it as shootable as I do. I did run a couple of drills to at least give you some idea of how its performance compares to other guns for me. For comparison, I chose the Beretta PX4 compact carry, which I have more trigger time with and shoot better than just about any other compact 9mm. I also ran the drills with the Walther PPS M2 because I shoot that better than any other polymer single stack 9mm. The drills were the failure drill, which is 2 to the body, 1 to the head, and the bill drill, 6 shots to the body. Both are fired at 7 yards, starting from the holster with concealment. I shot the drills 4 times each with all 3 guns. Here is the average of my best 3 runs with each gun. The times are all pretty close. Most of the difference between the PX4 and the smaller guns actually came from the draw speed. It's always easier to grab a larger gun out of the holster. I missed the A zone a couple of times with the PPS, and I added a 1/4 second to my time for every miss. So that's why those times are a little higher. Otherwise, it was right on par with the Sig in terms of raw speed. The split times, the times in between the shots, were basically identical between the 3 guns. Now that seems counterintuitive because you would expect the larger gun to have the lower split times. And the PX4 Compact is an incredibly soft shooting gun. I think it has less felt recoil than even most full-size 9mm. But for me, the sights don't always track straight up and down. I think maybe because of the rotating barrel design, the sights tend to wobble a little under recoil and don't always return exactly to the same spot, at least for me. The PPS and the P365 have a little more snap to them, but the recoil path is kind of more predictable straight up and down. So those things kind of cancel each other out, and I end up with similar split times. Now again, that's just for me. That might have to do with the way I'm gripping the gun or with how my eyes perceive the sights. For you, it might be completely different. The big takeaway here is that for me, I feel like I'm sacrificing very little in terms of shooting performance by carrying the P365 XL versus a larger 9mm. Now, my original intention for this review was to compare the XL and the original P365. Then the lockdown thing happened and it wasn't going to be practical for me to borrow the other gun like I had planned. But once I started shooting and carrying the XL, I also kind of just lost interest in the other gun. This is such a good shooter and it's been so easy to conceal that I have never felt the need for it to be smaller. Even so, I should probably mention that just like the P320 series, the P365 has a serialized fire control unit. That means the part that legally counts as a firearm is not the frame itself, it's inside the frame. So if you have a P365 XL, for about 40 or 50 bucks, you can pick up a standard P365 grip module. It takes about 30 seconds to swap the parts around, and then you have the shorter grip with the longer XL slide. Of course, you also have to drop another 50 bucks for one of the smaller 10-round magazines to go with it. I'm pretty happy with the size of the gun as is, though, and really there's not much in general I would want to change here other than what I already mentioned about the safety. It would be nice if the texture on the grip extended all the way up to the slide so that you could get a better grip with your support hand where the palm contacts here. That needs to be grippy, it needs to have some texture on it. But other than that, so far, I can't find much else that needs any major improvement. The trigger is really nice right out of the box. It's got some take up and then kind of a smooth, gradual break. It's not crisp like a single action, but I actually prefer it this way. I want there to be constant tactile feedback as I'm putting pressure on the trigger so that I know exactly when it's going to break. I don't like a trigger with an abrupt wall and it just kind of stops until you press hard enough for it to break, unless it's like a super light single action. This is a good carry trigger. I measured it at about 6 pounds on our trigger pull gauge, but it doesn't really feel like six pounds. It is a flat face trigger, so you can put more pressure toward the bottom of the trigger, and that makes it actually feel lighter than it is. The Sig X-Ray 3 night sights that come with the gun are also very nice, and I almost never say that about factory sights. For low light, they've got a 3-dot tritium setup, but in normal light, the rear is basically black and the front sight has a highly visible neon green ring. Now, if you don't like that, of course, you can just go with a red dot. There are 2 screws in the bottom of the slide. If you remove those, this plate comes off and the rear sight comes off, and then you can mount a micro red dot optic. Factory optic cuts are gradually becoming more common on handguns, even smaller ones. I've decided to finally set aside some time this year to seriously train with a red dot optic on a pistol. I'll be talking about that more sometime down the road. The P365 XL slide is cut for the Romeo Zero optic, which shares a footprint with the Shield RMS-C. It will also fit the soon-to-be-released Holosun HS507K and the Swamp Fox Sentinel. These are some of the smallest pistol optics on the market, and I expect them to be super popular as more people add dots to their carry guns. I will be trying out a few of these, and I'll let you guys know when I think I can recommend one of them for serious use. I can't tell you whether I will end up carrying this gun long term. I'm always trying out different stuff and somehow end up back at a snub nose revolver anyway, so I'm probably not the best example to follow. That said, this gun does everything I could ask a carry gun to do. It is reliable, it's easy to conceal, it's comfortable to carry all day. I can shoot it just about as well as anything else I would ever consider carrying. It is supported by all of my favorite holster makers. I can shoot it for long practice sessions without it wearing me out, and I wouldn't hesitate to take it to a high round count shooting class. It's a compromise gun that doesn't really feel like much of a compromise. So I don't know if I'll carry it forever, but if you were to tell me that I had to choose right now just one pistol to be stuck with for the rest of my life, that I could never carry or practice with any other handgun, today at least, I think my answer would be the P365 XL. But they've got to do something about that safety.